Talk to me, Michele, on the street lights on the corner. City vibes got a story. Feel the beat, don't ignore me.
Welcome in everybody to another episode of Talk to Me, Michele. I'm your host, Michele, 1L, y'all, just one. And I appreciate you everybody tuning in. If you're live on Facebook, you're live on Instagram, I will be paying sole attention to my guest until we get to any Q&A. All right, so don't be commenting. You don't see me, girl. Yeah, I see you, but I'm not responding to you right now. I'm just keeping it 100. So you guys know I'm about to go in groupie mode. And I say that proudly today because out of everybody I've had on my platform, this is an extreme pleasure. Okay. If you do not know who this man who I'm about to bring on, you need to be schooled, or I'm about to school you right now. Rodney Barnes, number one. I fell in love with this man's work and didn't even realize it until I did some research on the man. I'm just keeping it 100. I really became a Rodney Barnes junkie with his episodes that he has dropped every week for me. And that is his podcast, Run Fool. If you guys love short horror stories, it's suspense, because he left me in suspense again, because I got to wait till next week for the next episode. Okay. So Rodney Barnes, I am a big fan, but he's done work on Boondocks, My Wife and Kids. The man's resume, I'm not going to even bother to go through the whole thing. So let me go ahead and don't delay any further. Mr. Rodney Barnes. How you doing, Mr. Barnes?
That's a very sexy opening. Even the music coming in grabbed me. We could just run the opening again. That was perfect. That was perfect.
I appreciate that. I try to represent, being a solo producer and
No,
podcast
you're
host.
doing it. You're doing it. You're doing it.
I really appreciate that. But I wanted to bring you on today. Besides, I am a groupie of yours. I'm not going to even lie. But I'm not going to pull a misery card on you.
No, I appreciate it. I'm too old at this point.
But at the same time, I have always been a horror junkie. And I know for a lot of Black folks, that's not so common because
ain't too many of us. There's not too many. We're a very passionate group, but we're small but passionate group.
Small but passionate. So that's why I think I gravitated to all the material that you do and the podcast especially. And I've listened to some episodes more than once because I do have a couple of favorites. But it's great work.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
No problem. But I definitely am getting you some new subscribers because one of my girlfriends, she is a junkie like myself now. And we look forward to every episode every week. But I want to get to our influence on African-American influence on horror. Since it's a very small group of us. There have been film writers, there's been significant plots of that nature. And when it comes to social issues, I think that's a majority of what we see in African-American horror nowadays, like with Jordan Peele's films. Do you have any feedback on that particular path that we're taking in horror?
I think it's a great one. I mean, when I was coming up, they were far and few in between. The films I remember, I was a big fan of the Hammer films and the Universal Monster movies and never saw Black people until my mother took me to see Blackula. And that changed everything. That sort of opened the door up for me. And not just in the film itself, but the reaction of the audience. The amount of fun that people had in the movie, seeing themselves represented in a way that felt as authentic up to that point as anything that I'd seen. And you look at today, like you said, aforementioned Jordan Peele, and there's some other folks. You have stuff like Lovecraft Country, even though that's not a film, but it's still,
a good series.
Yeah, and you see like stuff coming here and there that reflects more than just race. We get into culture, we get into families and dynamics, and that go beyond. Because when I was coming up, if there was a Black anything, you had to talk about being Black in some way. There was very rarely was it about the characters and their dilemmas, like in a Stephen King book, where it's just a family coming apart and they go to a haunted house and the house is haunted and they got to figure a way out. It was always, when we get to the house, it's got to be Black ghosts in there, or there's something in there that has to do with something about being Black. And not that I'm against it, because I think horror is a great vehicle to be able to talk about history, to be able to talk about culture, to be able to integrate a lot of different elements of what it means to be a person of color in America and the Western world, in a really, really unique way that doesn't feel like medicine. And I've always seen it as just like a conduit to a lot of different subject matter that was interesting. And even outside of film, writers like Tanana Reeve Dew and rest in peace, Octavia Butler, and so many other people that have come along and told some really great creative stories. I always looked at it as an opportunity to just be human. And I think
Yeah.
oftentimes we haven't been treated that way, in film and in literature. And horror films give you an opportunity to show there's so many stakes in horror, like
Yeah.
life or death, and the way that the characters, the protagonists, are dealt with. It's not always a conventional way to deal with the thing that's supernatural. So
Yeah.
you have to use your wits. So it's an opportunity to really show intelligent people doing intelligent things, or sometimes you get the people that aren't that smart, but somebody smart has to come in and deal with the thing in order to fix a problem.
Right.
And I just love us being at the center of that narrative.
I'm glad because I was getting tired of going to horror films as much as I love them. And, it's usually more Caucasian cast. And if
Yeah.
they do have one black friend, he the first to
He gonna
go.
die. Yeah, he gonna die. He might die in the opening credits. He did something wrong. He
Exactly.
might slip and die right after they say his name when the letters come on.
Like, so, I didn't even get to his last name. But
Yep.
anyhow, but yeah,
But we liked him though. We liked him. He was a good guy. It's unfortunate he had to go, but he had to set it up for the real people to come in and save the day.
exactly. But I like the way that, like I said, your approach and your passion for the horror genre. But I would like to see if you could highlight for me a couple of key works and pioneers in African American horror that they've made a major impact on the work you do today.
Like I said, Tanana Reeve Dew was huge when I was coming up, because I had this period where when I was at Howard University, and I wanted to do this, but I come from a small town, Annapolis, Maryland, right outside of Baltimore, and I wanted to do this, but I didn't see me as someone who was capable of doing this, and I needed an emotional, psychological bridge. If I could just find someone who looked like me, who sounded like me, that I could read their work, I could talk to, like I would understand their world in such a way that it would help me build a world that I have in my head, but I don't necessarily see a way to execute it.
Right.
And Tanana Reeve Dew, ironically, I had a great conversation with Spike Lee when I was in college that influenced me as well. And even though he hasn't done horror, in a traditional sense, I look at I know he did the Sweet Blood, which was kind of like Ganja and Hess, but I
Yes.
look at Ganja and Hess as Ganja and Hess. But it's so many other influences that just helped me find the confidence to be a storyteller. Robert
Yeah.
Townsend was another one. Not necessarily people in horror. It was just people who really helped me build the bridge emotionally and psychologically to taking a shot at being a storyteller on a different level.
Yeah. And I mean that I think that's what impels me. And I'm this is sidetrack here. After I hooked on some of my girlfriends onto your podcast, it's like, oh girl, that voice.
Oh
It's like
man.
1-900 horror. So
Yeah,
I'm like,
there you go. Tell them I
I
said
just
thank you. Tell them I said how much I appreciate it.
oh, I'm sure they're tuned in because when I told them you were going to be on, they were like, "Oh my goodness, him!" I was like, "Yes, girl." So, but
Oh, thank you, mate. I like the sound of that. I would have wore a different shirt if I'd known they was all going to be listening.
uh,
I like the rugged. I'm going through my Richard Roundtree phase right now. My
well,
ruggedness. You know, there you
it's
go.
all good. It's all
Thank
good.
you.
Matter of fact,
Thank you.
I wore the I don't know if you can see my Dracula shirt in your honor because
Okay.
I was I got to do my horror thing, just to
Thank
pay
you.
respects.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
No problem. But back to the questions right quick. The portrayal of African Americans in horror films and some books, they've evolved so much significantly that we're basically from the stereotypical roles that you basically see African American actors play to more complex characters. How do you perceive this notion? Do you think that we're stuck in a time warp when it comes to the roles that we have in horror films, or are we expanding?
I think they're good things. I see. Just the fact that you can ask the question means that there are good things that are happening. Like you said, Jordan Peele. You see some stuff. I forget the show that's on Amazon. Forget the name of that show. It's another horror themed show like Them or something like that.
Them, that's it. Yeah.
Okay, Them. We said Lovecraft Country. Every once in a while, another one pops up here or there. It's a weird time in the business, though, I think, since the strike, just to get things made, just
Yeah.
anything for across the board. So it's hard to have like we go through these periods sometimes where you see a cluster of films come out. I remember Eve's Bayou, and
Yeah.
it was right in there. We had like three or four of them that were came out at the same time. Um, it's a tough one for me because the ones that seem to come out are higher quality,
Yeah.
but I don't see many of them. And I remember there was a time after when Black Panther came out and then Get Out. I don't know which one came out before the other. But I remember my agents and representatives were like open to the idea because I've been trying for years to get something made, done, whatever. I got a couple of projects in development right now. But
Hmm.
it's so difficult to get something made and sustain um, just a regular influx of new films that are culturally diverse, that come from us, that come from a lot of different entry points. It's really hard to sustain them. And I think it's people like yourself, people that are making things, the podcast, the comic books, the novels, all of the different things that keep it going, that give hope and an opportunity for the larger things to be done. Because even if larger things aren't being done right now, at least there's an audience that's being served to show that there is an audience for these
Yeah.
things. So
Hmm.
I appreciate that. I don't know if I answered the question, but that was what was going through my mind. It's such a difficult, there's so many facets to the answer that it's hard to just land on one thing that's going to completely satisfy it, I think.
Well, look, long as you keep talking, I have no problem whatever answer you throw at me because I'm here for it. Okay, I'm here
Thank you.
for
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
it. But now that we have social and political movements, of course,
Yes.
such as civil rights movements, contemporary movements for racial justice, influence the themes of storytelling and horror.
Yes.
Can you discuss any specific examples of where these movements shaped or inspired your own work of African American horror?
Yeah. I mean, when I was coming up, my mother was a school teacher for 45 years. And so I was always had literature around. Like I was reading books like Soul on Ice, Man Child in the Promised Land, and all of that stuff as a child. It was always in front of me.
Yeah.
So reading was sort of the thing that opened up the door to film and television in a different kind of way. And that stuff that I was reading was based on either the Pan African movement at the time, the civil rights movement in some ways. Today's movement, even though in some ways it's more progressive because it's built off of the work that all the people before us, laid. Um, it's more difficult, I think, to identify it in the way that you could before in film and in literature. Like back in the days, it was revolutionary just for a film like Blackula to be made,
Yeah.
just to have it that existed. Now, when you make something, it's not just a miracle that it got made. It's what does it say?
Right.
Like what's in the content of the thing that it's trying to say. When you look at a movie like Get Out and it's layered and it's talking about interracial relationships and those things, it's the content now is the thing that seems to be speaking more to what's going on in the social movements and those types of things. The fact that it's funny. I debate my kids all the time, and they always talk about how they feel. And I keep saying, when I grew up, nobody cared about what I felt.
Nobody cares.
Nobody identified me as anything. I was hard enough to be identified as a human being, to be, that my feelings. Oh, okay.
Like, what are
And
those?
exactly, then nobody cared. Even if in my own house, if my grandmother hit me upside the head, she wasn't concerned about when I felt, how I felt from the hit and the falling. Um, but it was in love.
Right.
But in today's movement, I see that integrated into the content. I see it integrated into, LGBTQ stuff,
Yeah.
material, and how people interact as human beings, and getting more of an honest depiction of how people, um, express themselves in life. And that to me is an extension of that thing we talk about with Blackula, where just existing, just being a black vampire was a big deal. Black vampire in a black community was a big deal.
Yeah.
Now it's, what are they saying? What are they doing? How does it feel? Is it honest? And trying to find, and that opens the door up to more creators of color, be it directors, writers, actors, that are able to depict the material in a way that is more layered and honest, and all that stuff. And that, I attribute that to a lot of the movements that are going on today.
It's funny you say that, because I'm gonna share something with you. I'm just let me say, I'm a up and coming writer,
Okay.
and I do want to take my crack at horror.
Mhm.
And it's like such a wide range genre, and we have so many personal or historical stories within our community that we can draw examples from. And
Mhm.
I think that that's one of the elements that we do also bring to horror culture. How can we remix this tragedy and turn it into not only a lesson but a entertaining horror film as well? So
Yeah,
I do love the concept. I do.
yes, I do too. And I mean, even like in my book, Philadelphia, I wasn't so much looking at history per se, because a lot of times when you have, at least back in the day, a lot of our horror came from slavery. And I remember even when we were putting Run Fool together, when we would do research on folk tales, all of them came from slavery. And I was like, no, we can't. That's not what I want to do. It's
Right.
like there are other periods of history for us that are, as layered, and as human, as
Yeah.
that experience. So, you've got Reconstruction, you've got the Civil Rights era, you've got the current era that we're in right now that may be not as easily to define. Um, there's just a lot of different periods, and in each one of those periods they had their own struggles to deal with, not just from forces outside of the culture but forces within the culture. And there are a lot of interesting stories that I think can come from a myriad of places. So, yeah.
Yeah, but I got what you're saying. I agree wholeheartedly. With the increased recognition that we are now having in horror stories, and we're reaching broader audiences. It's not just our community going to see these films, since we are a big part of the genre itself. Can you discuss any examples or trends that highlight how horror stories have resonated with a diverse audience?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I had this conversation. I just did San Jose GalaxyCon this past weekend, and I was did a panel with a great writer, Mark Guggenheim, and we were talking about how, in my day, and see, that's when you know you're old, when you start talking about your day.
In my day.
Um, when you would see shows that had characters that were challenging, like Archie Bunker and All in the Family, or the Jeffersons, or whatever, and that character may express a point of view that wasn't politically correct, or didn't necessarily walk a certain line. You got a glimpse into another way of looking at life, and how people that don't agree with you,
Yeah.
sort of express themselves. In today's world, a lot of times I think content works along the line of an algorithm. It gives you exactly what you want and expresses to you what you want and how you want to feel.
Yeah.
I think the beauty of filmmaking from people outside of my culture and within my culture is that you get a glimpse into someone who lives their lives differently than I do. You get an opportunity to develop respect and insight into how people, you don't always have the same thing. Before, it used to be water cooler talk, like it was three channels, so everybody saw the same thing. Or when a movie came to town, if everybody saw it, they could all talk about it. And even The Exorcist, I remember when The Exorcist came out, even though I was a kid, I
Yeah.
remember how crazy people went over The Exorcist, and whether they were talking about it in the media, they were talking about it in school. Those of us that weren't supposed to see it, if you saw it, you could come back and tell your friends, whatever it was a glimpse into something that was outside of your experience. And I think that's sort of the virtue of having different types of films and different types of content that doesn't necessarily just speak to your experience. You know,
Yeah.
you get an opportunity to see a different way of life, if executed in that way. Sometimes it's just base entertainment. There's nothing wrong with that. But
Right.
sometimes you'll get a film that can move the needle in understanding. And I think that's a beautiful thing when you get those types of stories that, again, don't come from the world in the place that I walk every day, the shoes that I walk in every day. Um,
Mhm.
so I just think that's the power of film and the power of horror films and the power of things that are interesting, diverse, well crafted, all of that.
Yeah, and I agree again on that because I like there's some key works that we have within our culture. I mean, I know you've got a few favorite films yourself because I, follow you on, of course, Instagram and Facebook. So when you're putting up clips about you talking about certain horror films,
Yeah,
and I'm like, dude, I thought I was the only one that knew about this film.
yeah,
And you did a particular clip, and you were talking about your top, I believe, top five, and I think you
yes,
mentioned Near Dark,
yeah.
and I said,
Captain Bigelow. Yeah.
what other black man know about that film?
I got a lot of them. I got. It's funny because it's a weird thing where I started off, and again, sound like an old man because a lot of these movies that I saw, being an only child, seeing a lot of stuff, being 6'4" since I was 5 years old, it seems like, and walking back then, nobody tore your ticket, nobody checked my ticket or asked me how old I was when I walked into a movie theater. So I've seen a lot of things I probably shouldn't have seen, and I was the guy that would go to virtually every movie that came to town. And Napa, we had a lot of movie theaters. So all of these little dead and buried, all these little in between horror films that came out in the late 80s, 90s, whatever, I saw many of them.
Yeah.
And cable, of course, gives you the opportunity, and Shutter, love Shutter. They give you an opportunity to see a lot of these movies that you may have missed. But was a junkie at one time of just watching horror films. So now I get to talk about them and build a community of folks that love them as well. And it's kind of fun for me. It just brings some spice to life and makes it seem like I didn't waste my time and money sitting through all those movies.
Well, you know what? Like I said, I wish we were friends in high school because
Yeah,
this is like the vibe you
it
want
wasn't
to
many.
find.
It wasn't many. It wasn't many. Man, why you gonna go see that? I got a buddy of mine. And I
Right.
won't say his name. I won't blast him, but he posted a movie. Somebody posted a movie, and I tagged him in it. I said, "Man, how many times did I make us sit through?" Because I remember how many times we got to see this movie. And I think the movie was Serpent in the Rainbow. And
Oh
I love
yeah.
the Serpent in the Rainbow. And
Mhm.
he went to see it with me. I think we went at like a 5 o'clock show. I wanted to see it at 5. I wanted to see it at 7. I wanted to stay through 9. And back then they didn't check the theater to, all right, you got to get out before they started it again.
Right.
And I was that dude. I was the dude that wanted to see it again and again and again. And we didn't have cable, or you just press a button on your phone and you get anything you want, whatever you wanted. I don't know when this thing is coming to the video store, so I want to see it as much as possible. You don't know when it's leaving the theater. I was that dude.
Yeah. Well, see, I was the chick that was, once it did have, once VCRs came out,
Oh
and we
yeah,
were
that
able to,
too.
yeah.
Yeah,
So once my parents were out the house, ooh, I'm watch The Exorcist. I'm gonna
yeah.
watch it, So because I was, young, but I
Phantasm.
always been drawn to it.
It was Phantasm for me. I remember that was one of the first. We had the big top loading VCR where you stick it in. It was like a lawnmower where you
Right?
stick it in the top and push it down,
What's it there?
and the engine would start up. It was literally like a lawnmower. Those were the movies when the video store first opened up. So
Yes. And God forbid if you was watching something you didn't have no business watching and that
that would be me
tape
too.
got wound up. Yeah, you'd be like, oh,
Yeah,
I can't
that's another
rewind.
that's the other video we'll do later. That's the other interview. You can't do it on this video, but yeah.
As you said in the previous episode, this is not a smut show. So we're gonna go.
No, no, no. Of course
I'm
not.
teasing.
Of course
I'm
not.
teasing.
Yes, yes. No. This is for the Lord. We're doing the Lord's work right now.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the Lord's work being done right now, but I do have to ask you on a comical and a real note,
Yeah.
why are black folks scared of clowns? Why do we black
I
folks
have to
don't like
say, I
clowns?
have a thing with clowns too. I think John Wayne Gacy, legitimized it for me when I found out that there was a serial killer with a clown. But for me, they were always odd to me. I never saw them as entertaining. Like when you would go to the circus as a kid, and they would come up to you and smile. And I'm like, "Oh, all right, I guess that's that part of me that's true to my culture." But the book, it didn't help. And like I said, John
Yeah.
Gacy didn't help. And, I went to the circus for the animals. I didn't really go for the clowns. I appreciate the clowns, and I know that it's an art form, and I respect the art form. But I never, it's like behind that smile could be a killer.
Well, yeah, I understand we did have a former serial killer taking on that persona, but at the same time, I did find it very entertaining. I've never had a fear of clowns, I put you that way. So
Right.
that's why I think I was able to, indulge into that series a little bit more. But I
Oh,
was just like, why?
I had a thing. Whether it was mimes, anybody that put makeup on their face like that, mimes, some of the women I've known over the course of my life, anybody that put too much
Oh,
makeup on, I've always questioned, whether or not they could come back and kill me. And some of them have tried, but that's another video. We'll do that in the third video. But yeah,
yeah, yeah. We'll catch up
yeah,
on the
that's
comedy
the second
side
one.
of the
Hey, yeah,
makeup.
we'll get that one. We'll get that one.
Now, we mentioned Jordan Peele earlier, since he seems to be, as far as films are concerned, bringing us into the spotlight of a lot of films. So I just wanted to briefly go over some of his productions, because I want to say Out almost had me pissed off in the credits, because you know how the setup is. And you see this young black man, he's dating a Caucasian woman, and he's going to this family's house, and it's like the oddest vibe that's like semi-racist, but not too racist.
Right.
So racism, I want to say, used played a big portion in that role, where rumors are, when we're kidnapped and our organs are taken and we have certain strengths. So do you think he tapped on a myth that we still have to deal with today?
Yeah, I mean, I think the brilliance of Jordan is his ability to speak to these things without directly speaking to them, to speak to the feeling that they conjure. So it's like he doesn't specifically have to say that thing, but he's close enough to it that you feel the paranoia and some of the stuff that comes with existing in this culture, and some of the things that we have to figure out on our own because the mainstream world isn't on it. But we have the kind of this underground railroad of information that we share with each other. And he's able to sort of tap into that.
Yeah. That one, Us, I wasn't too crazy about it. I thought, that's one of those I have to keep watching to make sure I got the concept right. But I did like Nope. I
Yeah.
will say I was fascinated with Nope. I thought that was a great concept.
Yeah.
But I know one of your favorites is Blackula, and it's influenced a lot of your work. And I'm gonna start reading comic books again just because of you.
I appreciate that. I'm very, very proud of my Blackula reboot. And Jason Sean Alexander, I think, did fantastic art, nominated for an Eisner for it. And it was one of those things like a dream come true, because I saw the movie as a kid. And as it aged and I aged, I started to see some of the issues that I had with, the budget could have been a little bit more. You start to some of the things that come with the time. I was like, if I
Yeah.
could educate some of those and highlight some of the things that I would do that I think brings the story into modern times. Like the late great William Marshall, I think was a fantastic actor. And I think he brought as much gravitas to that role as Bela Lugosi did to Dracula. And
Yeah.
I just wanted to create a world around him that's sort of the idea of that character, Prince Mamuwalde, that gave him his respect and his due deference as, being a really, really great actor that I don't know if the times could do in the way that I did personally.
No, I like that you put your own spin on it. It's modernized. It's a good series, and I mean, I promise you, every time Rodney he has like various giveaways.
Yeah.
I know I ain't got a chance in hell, but I'm gonna give it a
That's
shot
not
anyway.
true.
So
That's not true. That's not true. That's not true. You would be surprised at the people who have said, "Wow, how me." And it comes up, not that I'm playing favorites or anything like that, but
right,
oftentimes there's some people who just are always part of the conversation. And you
yeah,
appreciate those people because those are the people that are the foundation of you being able to, life isn't forever. And if you
Right.
can find a respite or something that brings some joy to it, brings some fun to it, brings some color to it, why not do it? And you depend on your little family, your social media family of people who you can interact with. And sometimes you might be having a difficult day. Life isn't easy for any of us. And just to take a couple of minutes away to talk about a horror film, to talk about a thing with strangers,
Yeah.
and all of you are on the same wavelength. And like you said, if we were in high school together, we probably would have gone to these movies or argued about these movies or whatever.
Right.
It's going to bring something to life that I think is positive.
See, I should have took more credit because I was more active on my personal account, which
Yeah.
I'll make it. I'll comment on one of your posts on my personal account. Hey, say it's the podcast girl. So I will definitely. But you've actually interacted with me on my personal account because I love the content that you do put up. It does create a community for everybody to interact and give opinions on, and
Yes.
give us some history because I know you were recently in New Orleans
Yeah.
and you are tapping in on something I got a real interest in. So I'm looking forward to the continued reels that you're doing while you're investigating these historical places that have great stories.
Thank you.
So I also want to get to my addiction of your podcast real quick before
Yeah.
we wrap this up. Yeah, Run Fool.
Yes.
The Run Fool series is a excellent podcast series. And like I said, I'm always listening to podcasts. Yours was definitely it's definitely in my top 5 because it's intriguing. You got the narration voice and you got great, production behind it. But the stories you'd say are influenced from your grandmother.
Yep.
And and that's really funny because like I said, the black family thing, we don't really discuss too many horror situations. What was some of the things that you loved about her story she shared with you?
Um, it's funny because my grandmother, hardcore Christian, took me to church every Sunday. So she would not describe what the stories she told me as horror stories per se, but they were truly horrifying stories. And
Right.
she would talk about these things without them feeling like they felt like a natural, like you were talking about a cousin. If she was telling you about a cousin that had moved away, she would tell me a story about trees that light up in the forest and how they led her home and how somebody passed on, but they came back and they helped her do a thing. And it was so natural that as a child, without a reference point, you believed them.
Yeah.
And the times that never knew when they were coming, we could be sitting out on the porch and it could be raining.
Yeah.
And she would just start telling the story. She could be hanging up clothes in the backyard and I happened to be out there and she would tell me a story.
Mhm.
And it just became a thing where it was so natural to hear the story and to not question the story and to be thoroughly entertained by the story that it created such a relationship between my grandmother and I. I'm an only child. I got a lot of half brothers and sisters who I consider brothers and sisters. If y'all are listening, I love y'all, most of y'all. And, there was a thing where my grandmother made my childhood feel fully realized by being such a character. And any of the things that were painful were placed in perspective and not at the forefront of my mind. So I focused on them. They were there and I felt them, but I don't think I felt them with the weight that they would have hit me had I not had her and her ability to make life interesting. So when we started going down this road of potentially doing a podcast, I was like, this is what there's a math to Run Fool. And Run Fool is you have a human story that's as heavy and weighs just as much as the horror story. Because I think the two go together, that if you can have empathy for a character, you can invest in the story that much more so. And they have to feel authentic. They have to feel like real folk tales. They have to feel like things that come from parts of the country. Whether you're talking about the Gullah people in South Carolina, whether you're in New Orleans, whether you're in Detroit, wherever you happen to be, somebody has hit me at some point and said, I remember that story. I remember the story of Goat Man
Yep.
in Maryland, in Southern Maryland, or Chessie in Maryland, in the Chesapeake Bay, and just different stories from around the country. And we research them, we find them. Some are more closer to me than others, but we figure out a way to integrate me and my grandmother into them, whether it was something I was told, whether it was something I came upon, or whether my career, because I used to travel I used to commute from Maryland to LA in the beginning of my career.
Yeah.
And before I established myself and could move here. And so we tell stories along the way, my travels, because I did stop from time to time in odd places. So it's just a matter of trying to tell a story with heart, trying to tell a story that has meaning, but somewhere along the way, telling a scary story, but something that hopefully will resonate with you, something that will resonate you with in a way that makes you want to come back for more, but also improves the quality of your day.
I'm not gonna lie, Rodney. When I wake up at the crack of dawn on a Tuesday,
Yes,
first thing I'm doing is going to my Spotify.
I appreciate it.
And okay, because I like to listen to stuff before I get ready for my day to kind of set my mind in a certain tone. So your podcast is one I listen. Of course, I listen to my own, but
Yeah, yeah, of course. You got to. You got to. And you listen to yours before mine. Mine ain't going nowhere. I don't mind.
no, no, I listen to yours first because I've already heard the
Uh,
recording, so I'm
that's
good. So
true.
you,
That's a good
yeah,
point. That's a good point.
I say when I get some downtime, I listen to myself, but I look forward to every new release. And like I said, you be killing me with these two parts, but it's a good logic. I'll tell you that it's a good logic.
Thank you. And we have at the end of our season, I think on Halloween, we have an hour long. It's not a two-parter. We give you a thank you for getting us through season one and getting ready for season two. And so you won't have to wait. You won't have to wait come Halloween. You'll get a whole 1 hour. It won't be part one, part two.
Don't nobody call me on Halloween. Don't nobody text me. I will be listening to Mr. Barnes
It's a
and
good one, too. The scary one, it's one that feels more War of the Worlds-ish and apocalyptic in a sense that it touches everybody. It's not just like down the street you heard about it. It's one that touches you too. So it's a little harder.
See, and that's why I say this is like a dream conversation. Like I said, I'm a horror junkie. I love Halloween. I love fall. Halloween is like my Christmas.
Yep.
But at the same time, you've brought these great stories to us, and you're still working on so many different projects. You just wrapped up one with rapper Exhibit that I'm actually going to go ahead and purchase. Would you mind telling us a little bit about that project?
Yep. Florence and Normandy is about an infamous corner in South LA where it's known for the Rodney King riots. And we make it known for something else, that there's an alien invasion that takes place on a random day with two guys who happen to be who interact in a way that's familiar. Think the Defiant Ones, when you have a cop and a kid that he's chasing. But now they have to work together because whereas they were against one another in the beginning, something happens that forces them to come together. And it really started, I happened to be having a conversation with Exhibit one day. And he was like, man, why aliens never come to the hood? That was it. That was his major contribution. That was the conversation. And I had about 7 jokes as to why they wouldn't. We don't need to hear it like that. And, and he was like, no, man, they come to New York. They come to D.C. They always come to like the popular places, but they never come to the hood. And we started talking about movies like Attack the Block and what was the other one with Brother from Another Planet. We started talking about those movies, and it was like, we need another one, man. So I didn't have time to write a screenplay. And I said, I got an idea. How about we do this, we do that, blah, blah, blah. He loved it. I sat down for a month or so and pecked away and came up with a story. And John Wayshak, great artist, he did the illustrations, and we got a book. And we may do more books. We'll see how this one does. It's always with how a thing does that says whether or not you're going to keep making them. But very proud of it. Very fun process. It's like when you're growing up and you're having these conversations that you and I would have had at the lunch table at cafeteria. Why don't you see it this? We need more of that. Man, wouldn't it be cool if? And we're doing these things, like, whether it's the stories in Runfool or it's Florence and Normandy or it's Blackula or it's any of these things. All I'm really doing is taking my childhood, turning it on its head and asking myself, what would I like to see, and doing my best to make it.
Well, you're doing a fantastic job. Like I said, I am a proud groupie. Yes, I am a proud Rodney Barnes groupie. So hopefully, if we ever have the pleasure to meet in person, I'm in the Houston area, and I would love to have you back on. Really, anytime. I don't care if you just want to talk about a bird you saw in the park. You can. Hey, Michelle, I just saw some. Oh, you know what? Come on, we're gonna talk
It's a
about this.
spooky bird. It was a crow. Well, you know what crows and ravens mean. So yeah. I'm gonna come to Houston. I'm gonna come in the daytime, but I'm coming to Houston. I'll come to Houston. I ain't
Why the
ready.
daytime?
I'm at an age now where I'm a victim. I'm at a stage now where I can't just come anywhere all the time. I'm scared here in LA. I
Well,
come in the
see,
house at 6.
I'm about to say if you in LA, you've already passed survival camp, so I don't see why
This
you
is
would have a
true.
problem with Houston.
Yeah,
So
I'm not in that part. I'm not in that part though. I only go there in the daytime too. We did that video on Florence and Normandy, but we did it like at noon.
you know what? This is behind the scenes conversation, so I'm not
Yeah,
gonna even get into
yeah.
my commentary
Yeah.
on that. But
Exhibit was comfortable. Exhibit was comfortable. My head was on a swivel because I can't defend myself the way I used to be able to. So yeah.
But I understand safety measures, but then again, like I said, and this is totally off topic. You are a tall dude, okay?
Yeah, I'm 6'8".
You are a very tall man, so I don't see how you would be intent. Well, I would understand it, but
I'm coming. It's like there's this thing where I still think I'm in college and I'm in college shape and I can still do the things. I'm reminded. My children remind me, Daddy, no, just sit down, Daddy. You can't do that. You can't do that. And I still want to. And I say, yes, I can on the inside. But then I try it and I realize I can't. I do it and I go box every morning. I train every morning. And if he wasn't holding the mitt for where I'm supposed to punch, I would really look bad doing it. It would be horrible. It's best for me to just get on the treadmill at this point. But I still need to, try to feel good about myself. So
the thing about it, like I say, with everything in life, as long as there is an effort beats a
there's effort.
blank. Right. So you're making an effort. Don't even worry about it. But I cannot tell you, I don't want to keep you too much longer because I'll keep you here for 2 hours if you let me. But I'm not gonna do that. But I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate. Could you tell everybody where they can find you on social media? Any upcoming projects you have coming up?
Yeah, you can find me at the Rodney Barnes on Instagram and on Twitter, and I believe on TikTok too. I don't know TikTok as well as I do the others, but it seems like it's growing. The community is growing.
Okay.
What's coming up? I'm doing a Jack Johnson miniseries for HBO with Mahershala Ali. I've been working on that. Got a couple of movies in development that I'm trying real hard to write and to get made into things. A lot more books. I got a Batman werewolf book coming out in October for Halloween. More Philadelphia. A lot of Star Wars books. A lot of things. I got a book with Sting, the singer, horror fantasy, dark fantasy book that we're doing. A lot of different things. A lot of stuff. Every day there's something. Every day there's somebody mad that they don't have what I told them they was going to have a month ago, but my intentions were good.
I know you have good intentions, but like I said, I'm gonna put this out here anyway because I'm always a straight shooter. And before you drop that Halloween episode, you're welcome to come on here and tease the audience.
Well, I definitely will, and I'm coming to Houston. I'm just scared to be the old man in the club.
I got you. I got you.
So I'll come in the daytime.
Oh, I got you. Trust me, daytime, evening, afternoon, whatever. I got you, Mr. Barnes. You got to worry.
You can get that group together. You can get your group together. We sit down and go to Starbucks and we talk horror. I'm
gonna be real with you, Mr. Barnes. Right now, I would be selfish at that meeting. I'm sorry. I'm like, okay. I just I'm be selfish at that meeting.
Be selfish. It's okay to be a little selfish every once in a while. That's okay. Don't let nobody tell you otherwise. It's okay to be a little selfish.
They don't. So thank you so much, Mr. Barnes. I appreciate it. I will definitely be contacted with you again.
All right.
That was the wonderful. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. That was the wonderful Rodney. You understand the excitement I got going through my body right now? This is just like, yo, I am doing the Green Mile, which he was a part of. I am going to do the Green Mile. And I promise you, I'm gonna watch that. I'm having a coffee, just not spelled the same moment. That's what I'm having. So Rodney Barnes, you guys check him out. He's got comic strips. He's got productions. And like I said, I was just listening before I got on here with him. The new episode he's got on Spotify. And like I said, it's a 2-parter. So I got to wait until next week when this drops. So I'm listening. You can't see it because I'm blurred, but that's it. Okay, so I'm gonna listen to this again because I got to wait until next week before I find out what happens again. But I appreciate y'all. I thank you guys for tuning in, tapping in. Of course, I try to have my live interviews. We just wrapped up season 1 of Talk to Me, Michele. It's been an interesting season. You can find the last season finale episode featuring Tamika, aka Healing Hoods, on the journey of a tarot card reader. The conversation I had with my dad, that episode is still going great, and he will be launching his own podcast soon. So right now that season's wrapped up, and I will be doing new audio as officially the first week of September. So you could catch all this interviews and stuff before we launch it on our audio podcast, which is available on all podcast platforms. And if you enjoy the show, you enjoy the content, give me a shout out. You can support me contributions on buymeacoffee.com/Talk to Me, Michele. I gotta thank D Capri because she's been in the comments. And I'm sorry, D. I told you I was gonna be knee deep in this interview. I wasn't gonna be paying the comments no attention because I was gonna have this conversation with Rodney Barnes. So I'm a happy woman, y'all. So I appreciate y'all. Thank y'all so much. If you have not done so, go subscribe on all podcast platforms. If you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel, definitely do so because this is where you get to see the stuff in action before it actually hits the airwaves, okay? So everybody take care. Love y'all. Thanks for the support, y'all. I'm humble. Peace out, y'all.
Talk to me, Michele. On the street lights on the corner. City vibes got a story. Feel the beat.